This is Unique Smiles, the Facial Paralysis Podcast, and I'm your host, Brian April. Welcome to Unique Smiles, the Facial Paralysis Podcast, which are now available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and on YouTube. Search Unique Smiles or the Facial Paralysis Podcast. My guest today is Zoe Cross, who is a life and business coach and has facial paralysis from Moebius Syndrome, and she joins us early in the morning over in Germany. And thank you so much for taking the time today and getting up a little early to join us.
Thank you very much.
Now we've had a few people on with Moebius Syndrome before, and so we know Moebius presents itself in multiple ways, whether unilateral facial paralysis, bilateral facial paralysis, other physical ailments. What is it like growing up as a child with Moebius Syndrome?
Yeah, not that easy. I have a lot of good memories, though. I have a load of very, very positive, fond memories of childhood. But there was one of my early memories, unfortunately, also was of bullying. There was a particular boy in my class, primary school, who took a special interest in me and singled me out for physical bullying. I think I must have been about 4 or 5. I don't remember it very well, but I do remember lying on the playground and realizing that I'd lost consciousness because he'd, I don't know, kicked me or hit me, and certainly I had injuries. Fortunately, superficial injuries, but I did have injuries to my head, and I was bleeding and had to be taken home. And this occurred a couple of times, actually. Fortunately, my mother, I think my mother went into the playground, talked to him directly, and after that, she says, nothing happened again. But because of this occurrence, and because there were 1 or 2 other incidences when I was spat at, when I was kicked, when I was thrown to the ground, also later as an adolescent, my biggest fear, and always has and always will be, physical violence. And so by comparison, if people call me names, of course it hurts me, but if people call me names, the first thing I think is that it, or are you going to go further? So there's always this instinctive fear of physical violence, and that colours me to this day. Different. I could say when I actually discovered that I was really different.
So you said that still kind of bothers you to this day? Or that thought process?
It's just when I'm in certain situations, I just look around. I'm just careful. I'm generally speaking, I don't have a car, so I have to use public transport. So I'm on the buses quite a lot because, of course, I commute to work on a daily basis. But there are situations when there'll be adolescents in the bus, and they might say the odd word to me. They might make comments. It doesn't happen very much anymore. And I think it's because the way I carry myself, I've learned to carry myself the way I dress, maybe, and the way, I don't know, I think I've got, maybe I give out this air, I don't know, I give out this air of, I haven't got time for stuff like this. I don't know. But there are still certain situations when if somebody will comment, people are laughing behind my back about me, which occasionally happens. And I then instinctively try to sense, are they just having fun among themselves? Or Have they got nothing to do? Are they bored? And are they possibly considering going further and confronting me as a group? So it doesn't bother me that much, but there are certain situations when I've got my sensors out to see should I get out of here as fast as possible, or should I can I just even say hello to them and just disarm them that way? Because, oh yeah, I'm not actually a monster, really.
And it's I know there are some people, not necessarily with Moebius, but with other ailments that will have like a business card that says, "Hi, I'm this, and this is what's going on with me," and they pass that out as kind of like an informative thing, so you don't have to deal with the back and forth of those conversations, which can be very long and tiresome to have those repeatedly. I guess my next question for you though is, with the having gone through all of that with the bullying and with people reacting to you differently, what advice do you have for parents who maybe have a child with Moebius? What can you say to someone who's going through school with bullying with Moebius? Like, what could you do, or what could they do to help calm that down?
Yeah, it's a tricky, tricky issue. And for parents, I think what I see, and also from the German Moebius Syndrome Association, it's very difficult to find a balance, but it is very important to find a balance between protecting your child by all means, and this is so important to provide open to provide a haven for them to come and talk to you about bullying, to say it's okay to talk about it. Please let me know if this is going on. Do not hide this, and do not keep this to yourself. On the one hand, and on the other hand, um, to make sure that your child goes out into the world and ways of finds ways of coping with this. One thing I would recommend is that parents say, this reaction, people react to you, you look a little bit different to other people, maybe, and people, just like you are different in one way, people have different ways of reacting to you. Um, and what I've learned, and what I would say now to parents is, try to reassure all these people who are reacting negatively to you. It's a difficult balance to say, I am not condoning this. Under no circumstances should you condone this. And you should raise the awareness of the teachers. Um, Sorry, this stuff is going on. My child is being bullied. We need help. I'm giving my child help at home, but I can't do this alone. We need collaboration in the school. We need teachers to speak out against bullying, to say, okay, why are you bullying? But at the same time, it's a reaction, and the reaction comes from a place, let's say, of fear. And we need, and this is unfortunately also our job as Moebius patients, but we need help from outside, from people with let's say, standard appearance, and to help us, to join us, and to say this kind of reaction, which is physical violence, stupid comments, comments that put people down and can damage them for life, and are out of place, and they come from a place of fear, and we and our friends should do all we can to show and demonstrate that we are just like anyone else. We have our ups, our downs, our good sides, our strengths, our weaknesses, but we're still people. And you don't need to be afraid of us. If you have questions, ask us. But under no circumstances is violence or negative behavior, aggressive behavior, ever going to be a solution to anything.
Absolutely not.
Does that?
Yeah, absolutely not. There's no place for that. Did you find that as you went through school and the higher levels, like university, that you still had to deal with that sort of reaction from people, or did that kind of change as people are sort of finding who they are as adults?
That's a very that's a very interesting and multifaceted question, really. Let's say there are many things that spring to mind, but let's say my experience it got so much easier. It did get easier. Secondary school was still very, very difficult for me, not so much because of bullying, but because inadequacy feelings. I didn't know what it was at the time. Today, I would say I was trying to overcompensate for my difference by, so I was very quiet. I was very quiet at school. And I think what was happening was I was trying to be this perfectionist, and I didn't like to say things in class because now I know I was trying to be, I only wanted to give perfect answers. And of course, you can't always give perfect answers. So I was rather quiet than say anything. And so that in itself caused problems, um, which the teachers tried to deal with as best they could, but they did have an understanding. And I had some fairly good relationships with my teachers because they could see that I could. My written exams, that was all. I was very lucky there. I was quite good. And at university, yeah, things opened up. Going to university was, yeah, amazing because, let's say, I think I was with some very broad-minded people there. I did have some questions. I remember I had university entrance exams and interviews. And when I went to the interview, I had several interviews with various people at the university. And one or two people asked me, um, "Do you think?" Because I was going to study Japanese, and I would be going to Japan. And they said, "Do you think you will be able to cope in a different culture? We actually do not know how the Japanese how the Japanese treat difference.
Hmm.
So we cannot guarantee that it will always be easy for you." And I said, "Well, I've been through one culture change. I had to move from Ireland to Germany, learn the language quickly. Obviously, Japan is a completely different culture, but I'll take that as it comes." They just wanted to raise this awareness with me that they didn't know what it would be like for me, and it was all very well-meaning. I also had one tutor said, "Have you ever heard of smile surgery?" And I hadn't, and so we did consider this, and this was all we understood this advice or this suggestion as being, it was very well-meaning advice, and we took up the advice to a certain extent. But it was never meant. This was not meant as criticism. It was just meant as um, handing me some more information that I might not have access to. And generally, I had very. It wasn't really, apart from one or two interviews, my difference at university was never an issue, really. And it has been since then, but yeah, I think there's stuff there linked to my upbringing.
Are there any misconceptions that people have about you because of your appearance?
Yes, it doesn't happen very often, but people, because I have bilateral paralysis, I don't know whether that makes a difference, but I will be out if I'm out with one or two people, and people. So let's say I'm in a restaurant, and the waiter will come and he'll see me and he'll see my partner, for example, or he'll see somebody else with me. Sometimes they will tend to go for the other person, to speak to the other person, and there is sometimes this misconception, oh, I don't know if I can talk to her. I don't know if she will understand me because I can't communicate at all via facial expression. And sometimes I can see other people's expressions. I think, yes, they're wondering, can they talk to me? Am I intelligent enough to understand their questions? This is possibly the most common misconception. The second most common is, yes, are you angry with me? And this happens, this is quite interesting in discos when you cannot speak because it's too loud. I might be in a disco, I might be at a dance party, and I know somebody had put something somewhere and I moved it out. I don't know, we had a quick interaction and I just moved something out of the way for somebody, and they they reacted in a way that made it obvious to me, oh, they think that I am angry with them for some reason. And I tried to explain, but it was very difficult because the music was too loud, and I realized, no, just let it go. And they won't understand, they won't be able to hear anything that you are saying. So just let it go. You just have to accept that she thinks that you're angry about something, although you're not at all. Those are the two most common misconceptions I come across.
That's pretty common with the other people that I speak to as well. We're all in good company. So here's kind of an interesting conversation that I don't talk about a lot with a lot of people on this show, but what was your dating life like? And I know you have an interesting story about this, so I specifically wanted to ask you about this. So what was dating like, or what is dating like currently?
Yeah, dating, what is dating? I would have said, yeah, dating, oh, what, that was like a foreign language to me when I was a teenager. I now know about the love shy community. I think in the US it's called the love shy community or incel, involuntary celibacy. Um, and I was one of those. Basically, I thought, yeah, they seem quite interesting, but how the hell are you? You get on a date, totally beats me. Um, I did have one success when I was 15. I actually went to dancing lessons, ballroom dancing, with a friend, a female friend of mine, and I think she dropped out after a while, and I carried on to the end, and I thought I'd love to go to this ball, and then I realized, oh, I'm not going to this ball unless I have a partner. And I actually, in the last moment, actually managed to find a guy who was very shy, and I was the one who initiated the conversation, and he said yes. And so that was a very early success. But okay, we were just partners for the dance, and there was absolutely no chance of anything else going on. I had no idea how to do that. And that was it. Then I did have some guys that I was very keen on. I wrote one or two love letters, or let's say I wrote one or two letters to people at university who I was interested in, but I had no idea at all how to initiate anything. Part of me said, yeah, maybe this is not for you. And I think there was a very strong voice saying, yeah, it has to come from the other side as well. And the other issue was that I went to a women's college in England, um, and so I had around me at university, there were men in my classes, etc. But I also had this background of being at a female college. My presumption, to be honest, was that a lot of them had been scholars. They'd gone on to do fantastic things, but finding a partner was possibly not their main priority. Um, and so that probably did influence me a bit. So I thought, okay, yeah, don't worry, don't get too tied up in this dating thing that you don't understand anyway. Just get on with your life. So after university, I thought my priority is finding a job, getting independent, being independent, and not continuing study. And I thought, that's it. Now I'm going out into the real world because I want my independence. I want to be financially independent. And so I put dating on the back burner for a long time. And finally, when I was about 35, I decided I'll try some online dating. Online dating was in its early stages, so I tried and had some dates, and oh, I always had one or two first dates, and usually I thought, okay, I don't know, I'm not that interested, or they weren't interested, and it never really got anywhere. The only thing I thought when I was 35 was, if you want children, you must try. You must try to find a partner. And if you're not successful, then at least you can look back in hindsight and say, I did try, but I couldn't find anyone, and that's the way it is. Let's say I was lucky in that children were not my main priority. I didn't have to have children, which a lot of people do want to have. So that made me a little bit freer. But yeah, it wasn't until a lot of other things happened that I realized that I hadn't really been putting in the right effort. And yeah, it's a long story, and it goes in various stages. But one of the stages, a huge thing, was that I had this Japanese friend, female friend, from work, and we used to meet together, have wine in the evenings, late at night conversations. And she said one day, "Why are you alone?" And I said, "Why? Well, why not? I mean, there's no way that I can find anyone the way I look. And I mean, I've tried, and it's never worked." And she said, "Well, I don't believe that." And I said, "Well, that's the way it is." And she said, "I still don't believe it." And she wouldn't take no for an answer. And she said, "If you really want to find somebody, what have you been doing to find somebody?" And I said, "Yeah, well, I've done this, I've tried this." And she said, yeah, but maybe you hadn't put enough effort in, really. You've sort of gone about it in a half-hearted way, because you've got this belief that, yeah, nobody's really going to like you anyway, and this is limiting you. And so she actually set me up with a couple of dates, and they didn't work, but it was great experience. In hindsight, I would say it was great experience. And what she always said to me, and I now say, now I would say to people who have the love shy phenomenon, somebody who's never had a date in their 30s, their 40s, you need to have some opportunity to come along, and you can create this opportunity to open the door into this world. And so she started me on this journey, and I persevered. I then realized I have to go about it in a slightly different way and say, accept yourself first. You are okay. You have so much. What do you have to offer? And I started to feel a lot happier because of a few other things that were also going on in my life. And I started to really accept myself. And then my first adventure happened when I was least expecting it. But yeah, and my first adventure was in Ireland, where, yes, so I went to Cork, wasn't feeling that well. The weather was pretty bad. On the last night, as it happens, then on the last night, I thought, right, I haven't been feeling that well, but tonight is my last night in Ireland. I have to get to this pub because I know they've got wonderful music there. What happened at the pub was that I started talking to this guy at the bar. We started talking, and then the music started playing, but I didn't hear any of the music because I was basically talking with this guy for 3 hours.
Wow.
And we was just laughing. He was British, and he was, let's say, in exile in Ireland. 3 hours of non-stop conversation, and eventually I said, yeah, I have to go. Unfortunately I've got a flight to get tomorrow, and actually we hugged each other goodbye, and I thought, yeah, well, that's the end of that. What happened then was weird, unbelievable synchronicity, because a week later I actually went to my very first meeting at the Moebius Syndrome convention in Germany. It's the first night of the convention. I got into bed about midnight, and I just thought of this guy, and I just texted him and said, "Are you there? How are you?" And he immediately answered, and after that we had regular text messaging going on, and I was trying to forget him. And eventually I said, yeah, how are you? And he said, when are you coming back to Ireland? And I thought, okay, we've had 7 months. This has been going on for 7 months. And I said, I don't know what the hell this is, but I said, I think I'm going to find out now. That I went down for the day to Cork to see what was going on, and I just innocently thought, yeah, it's just having a coffee together. But yeah, it was a lot more. And yeah, so let's say we met in this pub. I mean, I thought, yeah, do all the things for security. I'll meet in a nicely public place. And I realized that the two of us were attracted to each other, but and I thought, I was panicking. I was really, it was exhilarating, but at the same time, it was really frightening as well. Because I thought, what do I do now? What do I do now? And I went to the loo. Literally, I went to the loo at one stage and tried to call a friend in Germany and said, "What the hell? What am I going to do?" And she couldn't answer. So I just decided, right, I'm in the loo. I'm going to get my coat on and I'm going to leave. Because he wanted me to come back with him to his place. And I thought, I'm not ready for that. I'm not ready for that. And I instinctively, though, fortunately realized when I was in the loo, I thought, this is the test. If he reacts in a certain way and he understands what's going on, and I say I want to come back, but I'm just not ready for this. I'm not ready to go home with you. But I do like you. I find you very, very interesting. I'd love to come back, and I will come back. And if he reacts in the right way and understands, then I will come back. And if he doesn't understand, then that's it. And yeah, so I went out there, and I didn't say anything. I just got my coat, and he was looking out for me with hawk eyes.
Yeah.
And he said, "Oh no, you want to go?" And I said, "Yes." And I said, you know, I'm very inexperienced. I have no idea about anything. But I do love you. I do find you very interesting. I'd love to come back. And he then behaved like a perfect gentleman. He then got my coat on for me, helped me into my coat. And at the same time, he was trying to persuade me to stay, but he was then walking me. He walked me to the bus, and we were talking all the time. And so we had one of these farewell sessions at the bus. We were waiting so I had to get this coach back to Dublin. And so we were waiting until all the others were on the bus, and he was sort of kissing me and waiting until everyone was on, and said, "Okay, like I have to go now." And I thought, like that kind of behaviour, that shows me that he does understand, and that he will wait for me when I come back in a couple of months' time. So yeah, so I came back in. I think I went back to Ireland in March 2014, and that was the beginning of a distance relationship. Yeah, that was quite amazing. It just opened my eyes to a whole load of new experiences.
Did that just
But having
absolutely
said, yeah,
just like blow your mind at that point? Just this where
yeah,
you kind of go, oh, this is never gonna happen, never gonna happen, and then you have this experience, the first kiss and all of that.
yeah. First kiss at what was I? 40. I was 41. I was 41 when I had my first kiss. I mean, because I realized, yeah, I don't know if I can really kiss anyone, because I can't really use my lips like other people can. With hindsight, I thought he was clever. He was going to get some food for us, and he turned round, kissed me on the mouth, and disappeared immediately before I could even hit him or anything. And so I think that was very clever. And I was then just left in shock, total shock. Um, oh my God, what just happened? What just happened? And then he comes back, and then he kisses me again on the mouth. And I just don't react because I'm in shock. Yeah, I just don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. And then he says to me, I'll never forget what he said, "Oh, kiss me, you bugger." And I thought, um, okay, yes, all right. And I needed that to sort of come out of my shock. And so then, but I didn't really think about it. I just thought, yeah, well, I didn't actually ask him, is this okay? I thought, yeah, I think this is okay. I know this is okay because the way he's reacting is okay. Yeah, and after that,
Yeah,
I do like kissing. Let's say I do like kissing now.
that's awesome. That's such a great story. It's such a good story. I love it so much. We're going to be wrapping up in just a minute, but before we do that, what advice do you have for people who recently acquired facial paralysis?
Mm, yeah. I would say with all due respect, for people who have just acquired facial paralysis, I would say anything I say to them is with the greatest respect, because respect for the difference, that I was born with this. I've had 40 plus years to get used to this. You, if you have just acquired facial paralysis, get all get all the help you can to find out what is behind the facial paralysis, because there are so many different medical issues there. But also find help to talk about what is going on inside, what is going on for you psychologically, mentally. How do you feel? And if somebody says to you, um, yeah, it's no big deal, because that might happen. People may, I understand that people in the medical profession as well sometimes put um, put it down and say it's not a big deal. Find the help that you need, and um, it could be a big loss for you. I understand it's a huge loss of identity, and take one day at a time, but remind yourself, I'd love to remind you that you are still you. You unfortunately, you're going through this experience, but remind yourself what makes you you on the inside. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? Find people that understand you. Find people that support you, because you need special support in this time. And look after yourself. Make sure that you are in a good place. Get any support that you can, because um, it is a huge change. It's a huge thing to come to terms with. It is easy. It is possible to come to terms with, but it will take time. Some people take longer than others, but it does take time. It takes the time that you need. But um, I'm here for you as well.
I think
um, yeah.
that's great advice. It's amazing advice, and think that's exactly what people need to hear. And I just want to say, Zoe, thank you so much for taking the time today and sharing your story and just opening yourself up to us and letting us kind of on the inside of who you are and what life's been like for you. And thank you again for your wisdom and your insight. And thanks so much for coming on the podcast. And I hope to get to talk to you again in the future.